From an unlikely hub, a revolution in gaming was born. In a country rarely mentioned among tech powerhouses, one founder's journey would change the landscape forever.
Turkey has created its first unicorn as a gaming company, which Rina co-founded, and Turkey went on to not only build another unicorn, but also 80 studios came out of Spyke Games.
But for Rina Onur, success wasn't enough. After building a billion-dollar company, she ventured into investing. Yet something was missing: the thrill of creation, the hunger to build. And one thing Rina can't tolerate: standing still.
I can't postpone something I want to do for like a year and a half, 2 years. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't change anything, but in my mind, it kills me slowly, so.
This restlessness drove her back to founding, armed with hard-earned wisdom about what truly creates unicorns in the gaming world.
Investing not in trends, not in ideas, none of that, but investing in the people.
But the landscape has transformed. The golden days of easy growth are gone, replaced by a brutally competitive market.
Back in the day, we would acquire users with pennies on the dollar. Now it's cheaper to go buy somebody dinner than acquire a purchaser to one of our games, basically.
Yet through it all, Rina remains undaunted, focused on a timeless truth that transcends platforms and trends.
But at the end of the day, we used to play games, we still play games, and I bet we will continue to play games.
Join us on the European VC podcast as we explore how an unexpected gaming powerhouse emerged from Turkey and how one founder's relentless drive continues to shape an industry built to outlast us all.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. As you know, we're all about shedding light on the great people we have in the ecosystem and connecting everyone. And today I'm super excited because we're bringing Enis on for another episode where we're talking to some of the outstanding outlier people that are in the Turkish ecosystem. And Rina is definitely one of those. Enis, would you just spend a little bit of time to talk about Rina and why we should bring Rina on the pod?
Personally, it was crazy good to work with her. I mean, I've learned a lot from her between 2016 and 2020 when we did Fund One together. So that's one of the reasons. Second is I think she's been one of the cornerstones in the Turkish ecosystem. Turkey has created its first unicorn as a gaming company, which Rina co-founded, and Turkey went on to not only build another unicorn, but also 80 studios came out of Spyke Games. So Rina, Spyke Games story, now doing Spyke, was, I think, very instrumental in the transition of the ecosystem from creating local success stories to creating global success stories, starting with gaming.
Rina, you got to expand a little bit on that story. And we're also going to go a bit into the foray of diving into venture and then deciding not to. I have to ask that question. I think it's a super interesting conversation to have on this pod, a bit of an offboarding conversation from
That's a good question, Andreas. Do you have any other examples like that where people, entrepreneurship, VC, back to entrepreneurship?
I actually had one lined up to happen here in this month as well with a guy who built his own firm in Eastern Europe and then decided not to continue. The conversation there was around a failed fundraise, so to say. So they didn't get it off the ground, or at least they decided to shut it down. And as such, it's a bit of a different lens, right? Because I think you could fundraise for a fund pretty quickly.
I don't know. When I talk about everything I've done, it feels a little bit odd. It feels like there's something wrong with me, that I can't stick with something for far too long. It might sound like that. I get bored easily. But jokes aside, I did kind of flip-flop between investing and building, operating. I started my career with investing, actually. I started with private equity. I did invest in like large family-style corporatized companies where we owned like a large chunk of those businesses, and the mission was to grow them and then have a meaningful return for everybody involved. Then became my entrepreneurial journey, where like my life changed, my outlook to the world and everything I did pretty much changed because of it. So after Peak, basically, when I went back to investing again, this time, drawing upon my private equity experience and also my operational experience, I think I went back into investing in technology, specifically early stage, because I thought Turkish ecosystem back then was a little bit more conducive to that. And we did that, I think, quite successfully for a fund of our size and a team of our size for some years. But after that, the itch of like wanting to build something from scratch, having kind of full control over the destiny of that one project or that company organization kind of called back to me. Whereas like the VC hat is quite different, very distinct. So having long conversations with Enis at that time as to what I wanted to do with my life and what he wanted to do for his life, I think it was the best decision to kind of stay along a little bit, help him raise the team that he wants to lead with the fund as it progressed. And that's basically what we did. I stayed around a little bit and helping him recruit an amazing team, come up with a partnership that was going to take the fund to bigger and better terms. And then as soon as I felt that they could do that, I pieced out basically and went back to building.
Enis, what are your reflections from having started out together with Rina and then realizing both of you this wasn't the right thing for Rina and thus the team would break up a little bit? We did a bit of an offboarding conversation, but without one of their parties, with the guys from formerly Cavalry, now NAB. And I don't know whether it was unfair or not to have the full team on that conversation, but we had the conversation with the staying team and spoke about the process a little bit, but it was we out of respect for everyone didn't dive too deep. But since we have both of you here, I think it's an interesting and here we also have a very happy breakout, which I think is very important. But I think thus also we can really dive into this. Thinking back, would you wish that it hadn't happened? Would you wish that you had been able to, from the beginning, see that 3 years in this would change? Or would you be like, well, it was one fund iteration, it was perfectly fine, got us off the ground, we learned a lot together, we did great things, and we then just decided next fund iteration is a different setup?
Amazing question, by the way. It's intense, and it feels like this is the first time I'm talking about this. I like it. It's like therapy, basically. But you know how when you look back, you can easily connect the dots. And looking back, I feel like it was kind of obvious. But if I knew while we were partnering up back in 2016, then I think life would have been more difficult for me. Not knowing and then living in the moment while she decides to leave, and then we're raising fund too, and then there needs to be a transition, etc. I guess made me over ambitious or over optimistic about what I can do, which enabled us to, do the second fund, and now we're doing the third fund, et cetera. But if I knew back in 2016 that this was going to be, say, a 3 to 4 year partnership, then I think my pessimistic side, my risk-averse, non-entrepreneurial side would kick in throughout that 4 years. So I'd be less committed, which would de-optimize the outcome for me. I don't know, Rina, what do you think?
I mean, first of all, neither of us knew. Nobody knew. I have like the saying, nobody gets married thinking they're going to divorce one day. That never happens, because then you wouldn't get married in the first place. I didn't think I wasn't going to do this for many years to come. I thought now I was in a different stage of my life where I didn't have the mental capacity or the energy or the time to actually give 150% of my life and my time to a new venture. So I thought this was my thing, that I was going to do this for long periods of time. I didn't think, like, we started out with the 500 Startups brand. I didn't think, that was not going to be in the picture at some points. And none of these things we really thought about. But like throughout my life, all the time, instead of making like very long-term, very definite plans, I make plans around people because I think people are the ones who bring about or kill opportunities. And when I first met Enis, we weren't even peers at that point. Like in a very classical Turkish sense, I was his boss. And if I didn't really truly believe in him as a person and in his potential, I wouldn't have brought him up and like pulled him up first to my peer level, even before I had ideas about leaving and doing something else. I think from an outside, what people might be missing is Enis didn't rise up through the ranks and became like a partner and a GP in this organization because I was going to leave. This happened way before even I had ideas about leaving. And back then, I actually had ideas about continuing. And if I wanted to continue, I knew that we had to invest into building like a more robust system. It could not be just a Rina show, like accompanied by other people. It had to be like a partnership of people who would bring like different things to the table. And then like that partnership could like build a larger team as well. So I always kind of like make my decisions based on people. And even the first moments of when I started having like this internal questioning and discussion around what do I want to do? Like, do I want to go back to building? Enis was actually one of the first people I opened up to, like being very honest. Like, these are some of the thoughts and ideas I'm thinking about. I don't even know what I'm going to do yet. Like back then, like the gaming hadn't recrystallized. And I actually was like, listen, I love working with you. Whatever we do, I think we can figure it out. If you also have the inclination of saying, maybe investing is not like what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm young, yada, yada. Let's do something together. I'm like super open to figuring out what we can do together. And those were like some of the conversations we had, and like internal, like looking in and kind of like understanding what we want for long term.
Again, my risk-averse side, by the way, kind of kicked in because I knew that I can do a fund, at least for the foreseeable future, and make money with it. Whereas jumping into entrepreneurship, something I've never done before, gaming, non-gaming doesn't matter, I guess, didn't have the courage.
Yeah, he gave me like this crazy plan of let's not do something for the next like 18 to 24 months and then we can do something. I'm like, what is that? Like who? Like,
yeah.
Like, no, it's too late. Like, it's too late even today. We should have started yesterday. That's like so not me. I'm like, I can't postpone something I want to do for like a year and a half, 2 years. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't change anything, but in my mind, it kills me slowly. So
it's pretty funny to even hear Enis be positioned as someone who think about not being in venture, because to me, Enis, you're Mr. Venture. You're like everything about you is just venture, because you're the way
I'm not sure if it's a compliment, but I'm taking
exactly.
it as a
I
compliment.
wouldn't take that as a compliment.
I'm not sure if this is good.
To me, when I say this, it's because you're always thinking about the next thing. You're always, every time I talk to you, it's about, I'm thinking about this, about the firm. What's your take? What do you hear in the market? Like, and you're always pushing to meet the next great founder, talk about the next thing that you're not sure about with the firm or planning to do, which for me, it seems like just so much the right mindset. And also, I think it's also rare to meet people with your type of energy in venture. So I actually think so. I think we have great people in venture, but I think that you're definitely one of those that taught me in the beginning very clearly that there's definitely difference in the caliber of people. And it's so
Dude,
clear.
I'm putting this into our pitch deck. We're raising Fund 3. This counts as marketing. I don't know what European Union thinks about this since we don't have the marketing license, but I'm putting this into our pitch deck.
Yeah. No, so to me, my whole mission starting EUVC back in the days was based on me realizing that there is such a big disparity between what the good is and the best are. And average just do not cut it in venture. That's why I'm trying to build a podcast where we showcase the breadth of Europe, and in doing so, also show what we have, meaning both the best and the maybe not as best. And I do think that that's an important thing, because I want to show what Europe is, and I want to benchmark every firm. And getting on the podcast is not in any way me condoning that someone is great or that a firm is just exemplary and everyone should follow them. I think when people listen to what I say, they can figure out who I like more than others. You're being one of them, Enis. But I really think that meeting you in the beginning of our journey was actually a very important one. So thank you for that, Enis. Just wanted to drop it in there.
Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, I was going to do that too, but I don't. Oh shit, the hearts are coming out. Perfect.
Oh man.
Yeah, got it all.
Rina, I want to ask you, if we get back on the offboarding conversation, there's the big topic that we can always talk about, and I will ask Enis about after, which is how do you manage LPs through this journey of losing a partner, so to say. But I'd love to ask you first, as the outgoing partner that really wants the best for your former partner, how do you do this best? What are the most important steps to take?
Not sure if we did a good job. Honestly, you have to go back and ask the LPs, I guess. But I think the second part of the question was really important for me. I didn't feel good about doing anything unless I knew I wasn't leaving a mess behind. A mess for the portfolio founders, a mess for the LPs, that I went and pitched this idea and got entrusted with their money and the team, all of that. So it was very, very important. That's why, even though I tend to hurry and move fast and potentially break things, this was something that I tried to do in a disciplined, slower than usual, planned manner, and in very true transparency. One of the reasons it was easier was because we had already stopped investing out of that first fund. So we had deployed all capital, right? It was a tiny fund. We had wired all our first checks, didn't have a ton of capital to deploy for second checks because it was like this tiny seed stage fund. Being in that position kind of lifted a lot of pressure over our shoulders because the team was getting ready for fund two. It wasn't like there was a lot of work that still needed to be done. And in that business and in that fund, if we were good at our job, by that time, a lot of these seed companies that we had invested in shouldn't have been in a position where they needed a ton of our help, right? Because they should have matured and evolved and brought other people to their cap table and brought other people who could be helpful to them as much as we could. So usually it turned out that the really good companies didn't need much of our help at that point. That's the reality. But in terms of making sure that the team was okay and the portfolio companies knew what was happening, that's why we did it deliberately slow. Aaron came on. I want to take credit for convincing Enis that it shouldn't be him only, that it should be a co-GP situation and he needs somebody, because I felt really lonely in the beginning, being myself. But yeah, after that, once they were together and once we did the first few hires, which I was still around that time, I think after that, they knew what they wanted to do. They knew what the culture of this new firm was going to be, and what the team and what the aspirations were. And I, at that point, knew I made the right decision, because I would never, I don't think I had the capacity to feel as excited about what they were doing as they were. I feel as excited about what I'm doing now. And this mentality of, these are all so many things that we can do, thinking 5-10 steps ahead of time. That's what they're doing for the fund. And I never had that desire to take it to the next level with the fund, but they did. So I knew once the team got together that I kind of made the right decision for myself, and I did them a favor by kind of getting out of their way.
It's kind of true. And also, while discussing this with Rina before her departure, she said something along the lines of how whatever she does, she wants to at least have a shot at being the best in the world and doing a venture capital fund out of Turkey and Eastern Europe. She doesn't think that she can be the best in the world in that, whereas doing a gaming company out of Turkey, at least she has a shot, and that keeps her going. I think because that was one of the reasons why she didn't have that aggressive mindset which she has for everything in life. She didn't have it for the fund for the past, I would say, a year or two leading into that. But Rina, what did you hate the most in venture capital? Was it IT conversations, fundraising, back office? It's not dealing with founders because that's the only good thing. What did you hate the most?
The back office, I really, really hated, especially because we had, with the first one, this convoluted structure. It wasn't kind of a captive fund with the 500 brand. So it was tougher than I think it needed to be.
Yes, let's put that statement out there.
I know,
think it'll be
exactly.
hugely popular.
I know. I don't know. I don't want to cause you any more trouble.
That was Rina. That wasn't Enis. Anyone
yeah, exactly. I can say whatever I want. I'm no longer involved. I think also one thing that was very surprising is that having a good track record as an operator, as building games specifically, after a certain period, I never in my life, this is a super luxury to have, and it's going to sound so spoiled, but I never had difficulty in fundraising, because at that point, after grinding for so long and then having massive success, it was much easier to build the type of team that I wanted with the operational stuff, stuff of building games. And then based off of that, creating good products and then raising accordingly. But fundraising for a fund is completely different. Obviously, yes, your strong pedigree as a founder comes into effect and you're not starting from ground zero. But all of a sudden, I was so far away from the comfort of, hey, listen, I have this idea that I want to pursue. This is the team. Give me money, which is so easy when I try to do gaming. Or so much easier, let me say. That completely evaporated when I was trying to fundraise for a fund. Having said this, we tried to fundraise where Turkey was going through a military coup, and we did our first fundraise around our first call around that time. So it was a horrible time, but still I didn't pitching this idea and like asking for money and like, please give me your money, we're going to do great things with it. I didn't really like going back to that, like needing to prove ourselves all over again in an ecosystem that hadn't matured yet. It was like, oh, I did this with Peak like 15 years ago. Come on, like I can't go back to that level of trying to pursue, like convince people again at this stage. I don't want to. I want them to just believe in me.
And like you have to convince a lot of people. I mean, as a founder, it only takes one. You need one lead investor and the others will follow. Obviously, it's tough, but like you need to convince one fund or one person sometimes. As a fund, you need at least like a dozen, if not, 20 people all at the same time. So that's what makes it tough. I think it's tough to find. And the only thing that's tough about venture capital is the fundraising part. Not that, I mean, other than that, it's pretty much a lifestyle business apart from the fundraising part.
I'm sure it gets easier, like being a founder. If you're Sequoia now, like I'm sure it's not as hard to fundraise as it is as like a first-time fund in Turkey. So probably that's gonna get easier, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's also the tough grind of especially being in a less evolved ecosystem where you're raising also from a bunch of LPs that don't know venture well. So you feel like you're having the same conversations again and again. You feel like the question is really, can I convince these guys rather than is my product good and is it worthy of funding? Am I right in saying that there's a bit of that feeling? I imagine, Enis,
sure.
You've really seen also how your LP base has progressed from being less institutional to more institutional as you've grown.
No, exactly. During our first fundraising for Fund 1 and then the initial days of Fund 2, it was mostly high net worth individuals. And fundraising was more us pitching venture capital as an asset class, which is tough to do because it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, the median returns are negative. Even top quartile returns don't even cut it these days. You need top decile to be able to. With financial engineering, people can make top quartile returns in more liquid markets. But that's what you pitch. So you stand out for the startup ecosystem and VC as an asset class, where as you go more mandated, institutional, more mature family offices, for example, who've been in venture for a while, you start pitching yourself. And I think that's easier because at least you're pitching yourself, not just an asset class vaguely.
That's an incredibly important statement. And I do think that people want to the extent possible, find their anchor investor in the group that look at you as an individual manager within an asset class they've already bought, rather than trying to look for that early money from people that haven't bought into the asset class. Because what I keep hearing from family offices that haven't done much venture and don't have an inherent belief in venture is, well, when I look at the overall results from the asset class, I don't see why I should pay the liquidity premium. So I think that's a huge problem, and I really think you want to raise that money from people that understand the asset class, so you as a manager or evaluator rather than the asset class. And as final thing that I want to ask you about this topic of managing through losing a partner, so to say, or changing the core team, what were thoughtful questions by LPs? Where did you see that they were smart in diligencing what the fund looks like now after Rina?
I think it was really handy for us that Fund 1 was fully deployed and we were in transition towards Fund 2, which gave us almost 24 months of no investments. Because even after we closed Fund 2, we didn't do a single investment for the first 9 months while we're still building the team. So I think it seemed more robust and stable for a lot of people than it actually could have been if we were in a more tightened time scale, or if timing was different, it would have been more hectic. But in this case, it wasn't. So all of our fund membership agreements, etc., reflected the fact that Rina was doing something else, and Rina and me were the two GPs of the fund, the two people on the investment committee, etc. Do you know how moving from Fund 1 to Fund 2 is the toughest? Because your Fund 1 LPs, not a lot of them are going to continue to your Fund 2, so you need to find new capital. That new capital came on board knowing the fact that this transition was ongoing. When you look at our Fund 1 LPs, I would say 70% of them did back us in Fund 2, but they didn't come in first closing. They came towards the final closing. So I guess they wanted to kind of wait it out to see how this is all going to happen, but then eventually they did.
Okay, now let's forget this whole conversation and instead focus on you, Rina. The topic we're actually here to cover, which is... So,
I have a question to Rina, which is on the overlap of gaming and VC. While we were doing Fund 1, there were some gaming deals, not as much. I mean, Peak wasn't a unicorn back then, although it existed. And we always discussed that gaming is cyclical. It's like buying a lottery ticket. It's hit or miss, not venturable, etc. But then it suddenly became very venturable. You saw this liquidity, etc. Looking back, how do you feel about that? Do you think, because I know that you did, like, I'd love to hear it from you. Was it wise not to do gaming between 2016 and 2020? And then is it wise to start doing gaming post 2020?
I get this question a lot because I come from gaming and Turkey's known for gaming. And why did we not do a single gaming investment from Fund One, which invested, if I'm not mistaken, from 2016 to 2019, right? That was the last check that we ever wrote. So if you look at that period, there's not one gaming company that emerged during that time that is commercially anywhere close to being successful. The first gaming company that came out that I actually wanted to back and tried to back, and as you know, this was Dream Games, which is a huge, massive success. And again, that goes back to the story of, investing not in trends, not in ideas, none of that, but investing in the people. And the people that built Dream, I worked with them at Peak. I knew them really well. I would trust with whatever they wanted to do in terms of gaming. And like a lot of people, including myself, we were right. But during the period that we were investing, there was nothing. And then gaming is very cyclical. As you know, there are like 7 years of the 2-3 years that where you're like massive, like funds come in, liquidity is high, M&A activity is high. So a lot of these companies grow because they have the resources, and then something happens. It's like, this is like magic. I don't even know. It's every like 7 years or so. It's different, but whether it's IDFA or whether moving from Facebook to mobile, whatever it is at that time, something happens and the market, shrinks again. Liquidity stops, especially at the later stage. So it's where the heroes are made, basically, if you survive and thrive through that period. And when you come out of that, then you're like peak, right? You're massive. With companies coming out of peak, basically, which started with a dream, came this new wave of startups and new teams that were worthy of backing. I think you guys backed quite a few of them. Some others fund backed some others. And I was very supportive of that decision once I knew the people and once I knew some of those teams that were coming out. But before that, we didn't see anything that caught our eye. And gaming, just like anything, it's a portfolio construction business. You have to take multiple bets for at least one of them to be successful. And now we have enough density and frequency of companies that are worth backing.
My first question was on this cyclicality of gaming. Enis, do you have any view? Because Rina just said kind of like it's many, like all changes every time. One time it's because of the shift to mobile. Next year it's something else, or next time it's something else. Do you have any views on what drives the cyclicality of gaming?
I'm more looking at it from a tech inflection or customer adoption inflection perspective, where if there's a medium change or if there's a change that enables a massive user segment to jump into gaming as well, which is what happened with mobile, it becomes very venturable all of a sudden just because of the rate at which the pie is growing makes it venturable. But if it's more stagnant, like AAA or PC gaming, I also have doubts whether this whole industry is venturable or not. So I kind of base that more on the growth of the user base more than anything else. So apart from it being more related to the interest rates or the liquidity, I think it has more to do with the growth of the user base. But I mean, I haven't been through a cycle yet in gaming, so I have no idea.
Rina, before we dive into just gaming in Turkey, let me ask you if you could just kind of contrast Peak to Spyke and just put the timings in there and a bit the fundraising journey, the products, so to say. How are those two different businesses?
The short answer is there are things that are very similar, and also there are things that are very different. We co-founded Peak in 2010 when there was not a gaming, let alone a startup ecosystem to talk about in Turkey. We worked like crazy. It was the biggest educational experience of my entire life and kind of changed the trajectory of my life. And we did like superhuman things there because kind of we had to. There was no other way. We were like learning and doing at the same time, literally learning on the job. There was nobody we could hire that had know-how or experience in the things that we wanted to do. So we would just hire a bunch of really smart people, be it from Rocket Internet or like big consulting firms, like really smart people that were good at solving problems. And we would just try to learn together. So that creates a culture where there is not a ton of patience for lack of efficiency, slowness, it's just a very cutthroat, very brutal culture where only the best of the best survive, and kind of like the ones who drive the results end up taking initiative and are hurt basically in the organization. Kind of like some of these unintentional factors end up being present in your organization as a result of your journey. But when you do it a second time around, like us, and 4 out of the 5 co-founders are ex-Peak, many of us have worked for many years together in different projects, successful and unsuccessful. And not only the co-founders, but the initial team members are ex-team members from Peak, where we knew each other. So it was a select team. So when you have the capacity and the luxury of being able to do that, you really know the types of people that you're going to work with. You know how they react under stress. You know how they react when you're successful and also when you're unsuccessful, because we experienced all of that at Peak. So that gives you the opportunity to work with people that you truly, honestly know and have been through some really, really painful things. So that gives you the ability to make really intentional decisions around the type of organization you're going to be. To be like very specific in a short explanation, we used to call ourselves each other a family in the previous organization. And here we don't call each other family. We don't say Spyke family. If anything, we're a professional sports team, right? I have my family. I want to get the hell out and go back to my actual family. But while I'm here, I want the same thing as you. I know you're as good as me, if not better. And we want to really do well, like a professional sports team. And we also want to have results, material, financial, all of that. So it's a very different organization. It's a little bit more grown up, and it's a little bit more intentional around some certain things compared to when I was at Peak, right? So compared to the earlier days, obviously Peak is very different now, I'm sure. Like now it's a part of a huge corporation. I guess like I can talk to the period and time I was there.
And as I want to ask you, because you have with E2VC, I wouldn't say you only back serial entrepreneurs, but you do have a propensity, you really like serial entrepreneurs. Is this journey of both, Rina and you are obviously close friends, and such a close friend that you've worked so closely with influences a lot how you think. But I'd love to ask you about this learning, so to say, or if this is part of the reason why you have such a strong propensity for serial entrepreneurs.
No, definitely. I mean, when we partnered up with Rina, and I mean, she was my first and hopefully last boss, I've learned a lot from her, and then her experience at Peak and also with HomeAway was very instrumental in our decision making as a fund. How to be fast, agile. We were doing the back offers ourselves. Throughout that 4 years, it was only the two of us, and our investment decisions were only solely founder focused. I think that was all her learnings from those past 2 ventures. And now reflecting that to serial entrepreneurs that we see when you're looking at our portfolio, I would say that half of the founders are more pedigreed founders, where they're either serial entrepreneurs themselves or they were in the founding team of a company that raised something substantial. And then the other half would be more first-time entrepreneurs. There's an arbitrage between their current ability and their potential ability, and then we're trying to put them in the right environment so that they can seize that potential. For this half, the serial entrepreneurs, obviously the risk profile is different than the left side, and we do have a propensity to be more aggressive with that right side of our portfolio in terms of ticket size, valuation, ownership, preemptive follow-ons, etc.
I think this leads perfectly into you having spun out, so to say, of Peak. It was a $1.8 billion acquisition in 2020. And since then, we've seen more than 80 gaming studios emerge from the alumni of Peak. I'd love to ask you, where does this alumni, what do you think sowed the seeds for that massive of an alumni? It is a lot. Also, maybe talk to some of the characteristics of gaming that permit there to be so many.
I mean, Peak isn't by far the largest tech company to come out of Turkey. They're, if anything, the larger ones tend to be on more logistical, e-commerce, fast commerce side. But the Peak phenomenon has been very interesting because it's one of the only or one of the few that kind of was a school or a hotbed of other startups to come out of. Like as soon as you plaster the Peak logo on your pitch deck, doesn't matter what you were doing at some point. Like if they saw that, like if the VC saw that logo, they were like, okay, like I want to fund you. The product line that we worked on, it's one of those very few things where even if you're 100% Turkish company built by Turks, it's a global product, right? Only like less than 0.1% of your lifetime revenue or users come from Turkey. Like you're not tied or pegged to whatever's happening in the Turkish market politically or economically, which is great. Like you're very well diversified. So you're in this remote place where back in the day, people even didn't really know you exist as an ecosystem. Peak was under the radar for so long, and you had all of this time to yourself to build. You're not under the spotlight, and you potentially could build something that could target billions around the world, which in turn creates billion-dollar economies around just one game. I think very few things in life, in tech, can give you that avenue. So even though like the e-commerce or fast commerce companies or fintechs were some of the largest in terms of size, gaming was one of those things that people thought, yes, like I can come together with like a couple of my friends and make something that will change my life. And in addition, it's very easy for people to start imagining what can be if somebody else before them does it. It's very difficult to be the first one to imagine something and like imagine how large or massive something can be. But once somebody does it, it becomes reality. So I think that's what Peak did for a lot of people, that it made $1 billion, $2 billion company with not a ton of capital requirements back in the day, a reality. So that's why small teams formed here and there.
Just to add on to that, Turkish ecosystem has also been through a transition. I think if Turkey resembled other emerging markets like Middle East, Southeast Asia, or Latin America, local success stories would give leeway to other local success stories. So you would have consumer lending, B2B lending, all these fintech success stories that happened in Latin America, for example. But because the ecosystem and the economy of Turkey in general was going through a transition, people were aspiring to global success stories, which didn't exist apart from Peak. So that made it a big magnet for talent to come into gaming. And then instead of people looking for other unicorn or decacorn companies like local e-commerce companies in Turkey, they looked up to Peak even more just because of that, transition that happened.
One of the topics I care a lot about is how we can improve the state of Europe, so to say, in tech. And in that is always the role of government and government subsidies and ecosystem development activities. Has that played any role in the Turkish gaming industry's boom?
It really depends. When you look at if you put the milestone as Peak success and question whether government had any role, I don't think so. But if you look post that, because after the government realized that, public bodies realized that there's a lot of money to be made and impact to the local ecosystem, entrepreneurship, great engineers, these are all learning paths themselves. They put a lot of subsidies to enable the growth of the gaming ecosystem. So I think once there's this, courage is contagious in a way where a lot of people turn out to be entrepreneurs, but it's also in a way where it pushes public bodies to focus on an industry the moment there's a winner, and that winner for gaming was Peak. But then after that, I think there was a push.
I don't think there's a causality. Yes, it's not hurtful. It may be helpful, but you can't rely on it, right? Like the speed of government can never match the speed of what you have to do to be successful in anything in tech or consumer facing. You fire ahead, you charge ahead, and maybe as you're progressing, like some of these government subsidies and help and financial incentives cover like a single-digit percentage of your cost base, like 6 months later after you've actually made that spend, right? So yeah, it is, I'm sure, helpful, but it's not because of it in any case. Yeah, we're based here. We do benefit from some incentives, but as I said, like at our scale, it's negligible, the program. So it's slow and it's small in size. So I think it democratizes access to the types of people that can come into gaming. So if you're non-Peak and you don't have that easy access to like seed stage capital, this is something you can benefit from at the early stage of your life cycle. But as soon as you graduate to even the mid cycle of your, mid stage of your life cycle, this is going to be too slow, too little.
And as you invest across emerging Europe, there's a lot of money going to industry supporting initiatives, especially in the startup ecosystem across the countries in emerging Europe. Where are you seeing them being super efficient, if any place? What activities are super powerful?
Good question. I'm seeing a lot of the same activities around different countries. It's just their maturity is different. Some are a few years ahead, some are a few years behind, but every single government is trying to mimic each other. In fact, they're even asking what, Poland asks what Hungary is doing, Hungary asks what Estonia is doing, and then Turkey tries to understand what's happening in Eastern Europe to support early stage equities and early stage, sometimes debt as well. Do they make or break? As what similar to what Rina said, I don't think so. Do they support? Yeah, sure, but they can't make or break. And then they look like each other a lot because there are certain characteristics which they have to abide by. So yes, every single country tries to boost early stage activity, believing that later stage activity is going to be more of a global value chain and that global funds can come in. Once they realize they don't, they also try to put facilities to be able to pull that later stage capital, whether that's bilateral agreements or investing into international funds to come back and invest into the country as well, etc. I think Poland is by far the most active one, but the transition that the Turkish ecosystem went through in terms of building local success stories, transition out to global success stories, Poland hasn't been through that transition. It's still a lot of the success stories are local or maybe pan-European. They expand to other countries after Poland, but that has its own glass ceiling. So although I think Poland is the most active one, I don't think it's seeing its benefits yet.
I think it's more tied to like the frequency of private movements and initiatives that are successful enough, right? So like peak, just a bunch of people coming together, choosing to do games, and then actually end up being very successful gives rise to a gaming ecosystem. Now we're seeing something very similar with the apps businesses, a couple companies that of their own volition and of their own private talent and resourcefulness end up becoming successfully, commercially successful, giving rise to like a movement around apps. So that evolves. So I think if we can see a couple more of those in a few different verticals and different subgenres, it's not going to be Turkey known as games and apps, but Turkey known as like a list of things.
Rina, as a gaming founder and with your huge network of gaming founders, what's the overall view on generalists investing in gaming?
Specific gaming investors would want to think there's a preference towards them versus generalists. Money is money, I think, right? So if you are in a luxurious position of being able to choose, which not a lot of people are in, then it's only in rare opportunities it becomes kind of like a problem or even a choice. But even in that, there's a ton of generalist VCs, generalist investors who, without even direct gaming know-how or experience, have been part of amazing journeys. We see that in the gaming companies that have come out of Turkey, gaming companies that have come out of Europe and Israel. I think because those generalist VCs have been very successful, there have been specific gaming or apps or whatever you want to call them, VCs. Because those first generation of or second generation of generalist VCs have been very successful with some of these bets. Like, each investor is different and each investor brings something else to the table. I think I would be able to say the same about each gaming focused VC. There are many others who claim they have specific know-how and expertise and can add value and they're smart investors. Everybody claims the same thing, but there are only a few in my mind that have been able to actually add real value to the companies they've invested in. But I'm like one of those people who think there's only like VCs can only do so much for the companies that they invest in, even if the best VCs, even if the most connected, even if the most insightful. It comes down to the operating team at the end of the day. And the best thing that a VC can do is sometimes like stay out of the way and just offer the help whenever they're asked, or stop founders from making fundamentally grave mistakes that are so apparent. But besides that, there's little value. So I wouldn't say, like, for example, E2VC is disadvantageous in any way, shape, or form compared to like a generalist VC based out of London. If anything, they're based here, so they have immediate access to some of these Istanbul startups.
From 450 or so episodes now, I'd say that there's a clear picture forming, which is that the more senior you are on your journey and accomplished you are as a VC on your journey, the less you claim that you have any cost in the in the fate of your founders. And as your take, like we've spoken quite a bit on it on this series of pods we've done together, where we've had a bit of a gaming focus so far. And we have spoken a lot about how gaming is different from other sectors. I think it's one thing to say, take the founder perspective and saying, what VCs are particularly valuable for you versus saying that you're, as a generalist, can be successful in gaming. It's a bit two different things, right? Because you really need to understand the dynamics to be successful as a VC. That does not make you powerful for the founders, but it does mean that you know at least where to put your bets and how to think about the sector when you meet people. Anis, do you agree with what I'm saying there?
I do. I think this is a people's business. So instead of big firms focused on gaming, even if it's a generalist fund, it has to be a person or a team of people focused solely on gaming, just because the inherent nature of the business is so much different, especially on the early stages. I mean, once it's growth stage, I think numbers speak for themselves, and there's less question as to what the moat is going to be or the differentiation is going to be. But initially, it's talent, cornered resource, and the fact that that talent can actually build a game, which is inherently a content business, and then very, very scalable. A lot of the VCs are not used to, it's a lot of pattern matching in VC, and a lot of the industries don't have that pattern in terms of actually getting the cornered resource to build the content, which is going to be scalable from the outset. And it's going to be, although these differentiations seem minuscule, they're going to be huge. A couple percentage points is going to make or break a game, and then make one company a billion-dollar company, whereas the other one can't even scale its game. So it takes a certain eye, both for the talent aspect of the equation and then the content part of it. So again, people's business, I think it has to be specific people in those generalist funds looking into gaming, which hasn't been the case for us so far, but hopefully it will be.
Now, I want to ask you a final question, which is, what is the outlook for the Turkish gaming sector? What are the big opportunities? What are the big risks ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely at a different stage, not only as a country, but I think globally. I think up until a couple years ago, you could talk about the big opportunity, the untapped opportunity in gaming, where it looked kind of like blue oceany. So, there's a ton of room and just build a good team, a good product. It's going to find its fit. It doesn't require a ton of capital. A lot of those statements are no longer true. It's very competitive. It's very crowded. If anything, it's as red as my background. A good product alone isn't enough. It's very capital intensive. So we're talking about a time where some of these massive titles that you probably know about on mobile require billions of dollars in marketing investment. So it makes you wonder, like, if you had $1 billion to invest into something, should it be gaming? Well, you could still have that argument, like pros and cons, if you were really, really honest with yourself. But I think the one thing I know, and the one thing I've always said, and this was true at Peak as well, games have existed forever and they will exist forever. It didn't start with Flash. It didn't start with Facebook. It didn't start with a mobile. So it's not going to end now that mobile isn't very conducive to explosive growth. It's going to be something else. We don't know what it is yet. But at the end of the day, it's about connecting people. It's about entertaining people, providing them an escape as to the reality, right? It might change its platform. It might change its medium of play. It might change its modality of play. It might be very different than what it looks like now. And we've seen a couple of those evolutions from single player to multiplayer, very content driven to user generated. A lot of these shifts have happened. But at the end of the day, we used to play games. We still play games. And I bet we will continue to play games. So it's the teams that are malleable and flexible enough to kind of stick there through the storm until the opportunity reveals itself. And I'm a true believer in saying that we don't even have to chase the opportunity. It's going to show, it's going to reveal itself to us. It's very important to understand that we're content developers and we understand how to build good content. So whatever the new medium, whatever the new modality is, we just have to go there and bring our expertise of creating the content. But yeah, it's very different today. Back in the day, we would acquire users with pennies on the dollar. Now it's cheaper to go buy somebody dinner than acquire a purchaser to one of our games, basically. Let me put it that way. So it's very different, but I bet it's going to continue to look very different like 5 years down the road.
And as I remember so clearly from your slide deck, that most of your companies, especially the gaming companies, the revenue does not come from Turkey. However, there's quite some turmoil going on in Turkey right now. How resilient is Turkey and the Turkish gaming and tech sector? towards anything that might happen on the national level?
It's very resilient. In fact, I think there's even some anti-fragility attached to it. The whole reason why the ecosystem went through that transition of local success stories giving leeway to global success stories was that turmoil. I mean, we raised Fund 1 a week after the coup attempt in Turkey while raising Fund 2 right before COVID. Turkey had a lot of issues both with the US and Europe. So Europe pulled back from Turkey. We were going to get EIF, which we couldn't eventually because of that. So I mean, we are resilient as a fund, but so is the gaming ecosystem and the entrepreneurs. I think that was one of the forces that pushed a lot of people into gaming. I agree with Rina about all these macro factors on mobile gaming and whether those are whether mobile gaming is gonna become hot again, or it's gonna be as hot as it is right now. But if it is, Turkey, I think, is going to continue to have an edge for the foreseeable future. Moon Active, also one of Spyke's investors, I was speaking to Shai. He told me that Playtika laid off a couple hundred people in Finland. They laid off about 40 people in Israel. Out of that 40 people came 5 studios. Out of that couple hundred people in Finland, no one actually built a studio. I don't think Turkey's going to be in that position anytime in the foreseeable future.
Since Enis and I did an episode with the founder of Agave Games, my kids have been playing Find the Cat and What the Hex. Tell me, Rina, what games should we be downloading from Spyke?
Definitely Tilebusters, definitely Blitzbusters. Those are the 2 games that we're actively running at the moment. So those are the only things that you can download from our portfolio. But yeah, we do level-based, like skill-requiring puzzle games. You guys are not our natural target audience. We tend to target middle-aged plus women. We skew towards women in our audience.
That sounds like my son of 7.
Yeah. So those are the games that you can download and let me know if you like them or not.
We will all make sure to give you all the feedback we have on LinkedIn or wherever. I will make a series of live demos and everything on the back of this. Rina, Enis, to both of you, thank you so much for coming on for a very honest conversation in the beginning. Offboarding conversation from venture capital. Not so often we have that, Rina. So
I wasn't expecting that, man. I was stressed. I really wasn't expecting that.
Gotta jump some stuff on you, Enis. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.